Hello and welcome to episode 174 of The Dive Down, a Magic the Gathering podcast focused on the latest decks, trends, and strategies for the casual spike. My name is Stanislav here in Chicago, and with me on the line from Denver, Colorado, it's the one and only Shane Beeps.
Stanislav, as always, good to see your face. It's so oval, your face. The jawline's looking really good, I gotta say, Stan.
Thanks. I'll tell you the secret to my jawline in the commercial break.
Okay. I've got some prime content for that, actually. The commercial tease.
Now, the biggest tease in the industry is, of course, our godfather, Dave Harbarger. Dave, looking sexy as usual.
Hey, thanks, everybody. It's good to see you.
Dave, how was your camping?
It was great. I have a little story for my camping trip, though.
Oh, man. Can't wait.
Okay.
Guild Base himself is here.
Oh, wow. Dave's college friends ask him to play a gig. Now he won't stop slapping the four string. Now, we can't see your hands. Are you using a pick or using your fingies?
Oh, I'm slapping.
You're slapping?
Now, I can't hold it because it's in a bad position now, but yeah, slapping.
I've seen Dave actually play the bass like 3 times in my life. And I've known the man for like 36 years.
Dave, where's this gig? I want to go.
It's just at someone's house.
Well, I'll be there.
Just so you all know, this is recorded in stereo, so that bass is a separate track, kind of. I'm sure there's some bleed into my microphone, but hopefully we'll be able to master it pretty good.
This is not a camping story, though.
Unless you did you bring your bass to the forest?
Well, I wanted to play the Seinfeld theme because, I went into a store. I went into a certain castle in Kenosha. You guys know about the castle in Kenosha?
Oh,
Yep.
man. How much New Glarus beer you bring home?
I brought $70 worth of New Glarus beer home, which is not
like
as
4
much,
cases.
not as much as it used to buy. You know what? It's
4 6-packs.
$40 a case at Marsh Cheese Castle. So
Good Lord.
they get
They
you
are
on the way out
overpriced
of
there.
there. Yeah, I know.
That's for sure.
Don't throw shit. It's so conveniently
Mars is
located.
cool.
Mars Castle, get at us.
They
Mars
have,
is cool.
they have a bar for people
Yeah.
who need to have a drink on the highway.
They got Ritz crackers and cheese spread. Like the Ace of Spades cheese spread. Oh, man.
I didn't do that this time. I was with my oldest son. My oldest son, who had little patience after camping for not having screen time. So we were making our way back to Chicago. Went into the Cheese Castle, paying for the beers. The guy carded me, and he says, I was like, okay, here it is. And he goes, I knew it was a fake. And he's like kidding with me. And I go, look, I said, I'm more than double 21. And he goes, yeah. He goes, yeah. He goes, yeah, you could be almost like 221s. And I'm like, yeah, I am. And he goes, my son goes, yeah, my dad is old. And then the guy goes, oh, he doesn't say my dad is old. Sorry, I blew the story. He says, yeah, he's old, is what my son said. And then the guy behind the counter goes, yeah, well, you know what my grandpa used to say to me all the time is, it's you that makes me feel old. And he goes, and then he looks at me and he goes, my grandpa used to say that to me all the time too. Implying, I think, that he thought that I was my child's grandfather and not father.
It could be as possible.
What's the deal
David?
with millennials thinking 43-year-olds can be granddads?
When you can be. Just rolls off the base.
Yeah, in case you can't tell, this episode is going to be fast and loose.
All right, I'm putting this away. I literally just learned the Seinfeld song just for that bit. So
I like that you had it off camera, so I had no idea.
How about for the wind down, you grab the bass, I grab the guitar, and we lay down some tracks. It's got a glockenspiel built into it.
I think we should do it. I'm gonna turn that track down. I hope this doesn't screw everything up, but we do have a backup at least, so that should be good.
Don't screw it up.
Okay,
so this is what everyone's here for, our long, drawn-out intros before we get into Magic the Gathering content. So
yes, on this week's show, we are going to break down as many as 4 tournaments and try to talk about some bans that occurred last week. Then we will dive into Shane flying his freak flag with more Ledger Shredder decks in various formats. We asked him not to, and he refused our pleas.
You can't stop me. I play what I like Apple Jacks, baby.
Meanwhile, I tried to figure out if Winota was a real deck or really just a fever dream that we've all collectively manifested in our hive mind. And Dave is just going to provide bass accompaniment throughout that show because I guess there's no sanctioned Magic tournaments in the woods of Wisconsin.
That's right.
We really need more music beds in our episode. Like, people have been clamoring for just like this, just the low level 10 decibel music the whole time.
If there's one thing people love in 2-hour long podcasts, it's a music bed that repeats itself over and over again.
All right, we don't have any music, I think, for this next section. It's just housekeeping. Good old-fashioned, dry housekeeping. Shout out to the newest patrons to join the Dive Down Nation. We got Ben S. and Leah J. Thank you. We also got a new review from Joey Pasco.
What a review it is. So generous. So many nice words, Joey.
Joey from Yo MTG Taps. You know, when the podcasters are speaking highly of other podcasters, that's how you know you've made it.
Right? Especially one as established as Yo MTG Taps.
Also, please check out Joey and Yo MTG Taps. You know what Joey's been talking about a lot about lately on Twitter is a new format that we'll probably never get to, but maybe someday, called pre-modern, that apparently a lot of people in my particular age of Magic bracket are really enjoying right now.
One of my old cards.
Yeah, well, I saw Mike Flores played in a recent tournament a Jackal Pup Curse Scroll Fireblast Red deck. That's some warm memories there if any of you were around for that particular era. But
so this is kind of like for, unlike Pioneer, which is not really the best standard archetypes existing in an extended format, this is just play the old decks that you remember and like.
Pretty much, yeah. But he came in like 7th place or something. I don't know. Curse Scroll, good card.
Today I learned. If you'd like to support the show, you can check out our Patreon over at patreon.com/thedivedown. Gets you into our Discord, gets you some extra swag. Right now, we're planning an Explorer tournament. We're trying to hijack the MTG Goldfish Explorer metagame page.
Yeah, we're just going to form the metagame page. We just have all the tournaments, and everyone just looks at our results.
I do suspect that by the time you're hearing this, if this comes out on Thursday, the tournament might be happening that night. There's also a chance that by the time you hear this, the tournament is over. But there are many tournaments, past, present, and future, happening on the Discord, so check that out.
We'll just have to figure out like what mode you put your deck in and the challenge in so that you actually can sideboard with 15 cards, but we'll figure that out.
When is Spectator mode launching?
Any day now.
Yeah, okay.
We're also brought to you by Mana Traders. We talk about Mana Traders every week. We use Mana Traders every week. I currently have like 147 cards rented from Mana Traders.
Heck yeah.
A couple decks I've been messing around with, and they're the best. We have a new code. Before you skip past this, the new code is the Dive Down 15. Those are numbers. The Dive Down 15 is our new code. They got to rotate through these codes now and then because they kind of spread to the coupon sites. So they like to rotate those. So if you want to get 15% off, see how we did there? The first 2 months of your Mana Traders service, use sign-up code the Dive Down 15. That helps us out. Mana Traders is a site we've used for over 3 years to really bring you this podcast. So we are thankful to them for working with us and for making that happen.
We had a much too long conversation about what that new code was going to be, too, and then we finally were just like, let's just put 15 at the end and call it a day.
Maybe next year it can be like the Dive Down 2023 for a while. We'll see. We'll see how long we can keep this going.
Mm-hmm.
So Stanislav,
Shanislav,
I believe we have you on the news desk for the breakdown this week.
Oh, sure. How about let's start with some actual news. We got our first round of Explorer bans on May 11th.
That was fast.
Was anyone else surprised by? I know we're going to talk about this, but was anyone else surprised by this being an Explorer only ban? Like, I did not really think that was going to happen, and then here we are. We don't have to talk about justification or anything, but I was surprised.
Yeah, that's the real conversation, I think. And yeah, I agree. I was surprised, but let's talk about what we're surprised about.
Yeah, and whether or not there actually is a justification. May 11th, Explorer ban, Winota, Joiner of Forces, and Tybalt's Trickery. That's it. That's the tweet. Wizards explains that Winota is a known powerhouse. She allows aggressive decks to quickly present overwhelming boards against unprepared opponents. Who's unprepared?
You came to play Magic. You have to be prepared.
At all times.
You put 60 cards in your deck. You did some level of preparation.
Although decks centered around Winota currently coexist alongside other viable archetypes within the full Pioneer format, she has proven to be just as effective when working within the confines of Explorer's smaller card pool. So that's an interesting little distinction there. Just as effective in the smaller card pool, as if to say they have power level expectations for Explorer to be different than Pioneer just because of the card pool. I guess it makes some intuitive sense, but it's kind of like putting a foot down that I don't think they ever did explicitly about their expectations for Explorer being something other than a temporary solve.
Yeah, on the Playing Pioneer / Playing Explorer website, which if you're a fan of either of those formats, you should check out. I don't know where they're getting this data. It may be from their own data or maybe something involved in like Untapped or something like that. But they saw that Winota had like a higher than 60% win rate, both in best of 1 and best of 3, I believe. So they quoted numbers, and they did not quote that in this article, I've noticed. But I think it's safe to say if they were moving this quickly that Winota was ruling the roost.
Yeah, and this article essentially confirms part of that. It says decks built around her are showing both an extreme amount of play and high win rates across Explorer game modes. So I guess that means best of 1 and best of 3. And the card has quickly dominated the format. As a result, Winota is banned in Explorer. Now here's the real interesting part. The next paragraph. As this is our first Explorer ban since the format's launch, we want to reaffirm our intentions that cards banned specifically in this format will become playable again as we realign the ban list to match Pioneer. One of Explorer's primary goals is fidelity to the Pioneer experience. Fidelio, eyes wide shut. So we intend to maintain this ban for as long as it proves necessary. When additional cards are introduced to the format, they will naturally change Winota's relative standing. As such, we currently plan to unban Winota and reevaluate her position shortly after the release of Dominaria United this fall.
What a weird called shot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, to not just say, hey, we're going to evaluate this as more cards get added to the format, as it becomes more even and closer to mirroring Pioneer, then we can reevaluate this card's place in the format. But no, they're just like, we plan to do this. We're after the release of Dominaria United this fall. Like, they're just like, hey, just that's what's going to happen. Deal with it.
I do like that they're saying they're going to give it another try, right? There are a bunch of people who love playing Winota. There's a lot of people who just invested in it. I think it's nice of them to say, hey, look, we're going to take another look and see if the removal suite in Dominaria United is powerful enough to help bridge that gap until we get to full Pioneer, because they didn't ban it in Pioneer. So,
And I believe that this paragraph sort of presupposes that Winota will remain unbanned in Pioneer. I think the other thing that this doesn't say that is worth keeping in mind is Explorer is going to change in addition to the addition of Dominaria United, because they've already said there will be Pioneer cards in the next historic anthology. So I think there's also that expansion to the Explorer format happening as it becomes a little bit closer to the actual Pioneer format.
I mean, the real question I have is, what is keeping Winota in check, more or less, in Pioneer that doesn't exist in Explorer? And we have like cards like Rending Volley, but there's plenty of options to take care of Winota in red already, like Red Cap Melee, things like that.
Yeah, it's just that Rending Volley has additional applications. You can use it against blue decks, which is kind of a nice thing that you can do in that case. And you do it with only Red Cap Melee, you're kind of stuck with that one answer.
I don't think it's specific cards as much as actual Pioneer has decks that help keep Winota in check.
Does it really? I mean, it clearly does. Like, Winota's not like every top 8 and things like that, right? But fully powered Winota in Pioneer is just a brutal deck, and it's just so effective and so reliable. And Winota's just such a stupidly designed card that shouldn't have been printed as such. And it's just bad. It's just not a good card.
I agree with that. I think the fact that it basically has haste is like bananas, where you can attack with a creature after you play it and get the triggers is woo.
Yeah, it's wild.
You know what else is wild? Tybalt's Trickery, banned in Pioneer, or rather, not banned in Pioneer, banned in Explorer. And they even say that since Tybalt's Trickery is currently not a mainstay in Pioneer, this ban will not be reevaluated as aggressively as Winota's. Players can expect a follow-up by the time MTG Arena formally switches from Explorer to Pioneer, or if Trickery decks become a more relevant pillar of the Pioneer metagame, whichever comes first. Barring that, changes to its legality will not be a top priority before then.
Yeah, because Best of 1 exists, this card's never getting unbanned.
Yeah, which is good, because this card serves no good purpose.
Yeah, that's true. It's chaotic evil.
Yes.
It really is. It's like the worst of the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of this deck because I have been trying my dangdest, excuse my language, to be playing real MTG on Arena, so like no best of one. So trickery decks are not really in best of three at all. But I think I did mess around with a little best of one just to kill some time one day, and I just saw it like twice pretty much immediately, and it's just like, no, God, no.
I played my fair share of Best of One Explorer, and I think I may have run into it maybe once.
So it's not that popular. It's just annoying enough to just be like, get this out of here.
Maybe. All right, cool bands. We'll talk about Winota some more in the actual dive down section. I guess to close out this little part, is there anything else that you guys think maybe Explorer players should be on the lookout for forthcoming Explorer bands in terms of lopsided power levels between the Arena metagame and the actual Pioneer paper metagame?
I've been playing a lot of Explorer, and there's nothing that I think has felt really busted to me. Like a lot of the over-the-top tools have counterplay, they have counter magic that can stymie their development. I think now that Winota is gone, the enemy number one of sort of creature combo can really get out of there, and I felt like things have felt pretty balanced, and nothing's felt truly broken. But I'm curious what happens as we get more data into like the untapped data environment and just kind of see what's really happening. I guess Greasefang is the closest second. I honestly feel like Greasefang has a lot of the same issues that Winota has, and we can talk about that as we get into these Pioneer challenges, I think. But I think it's clearly not quite as bad. I think it's harder for that deck to win with the other pieces. And I'm sure we'll talk about that during your dive down segment about like how Winota is winning and different angles of attack that deck has. So I think by and large, I think Explorer feels pretty darn safe, pretty darn even. A lot of decks that are close in power level, thankfully.
Cool. All right, let's take a look at some top 8s here. I've spelled out 4 of them. We'll see if we actually get through them all. We got Saturday and Sunday Pioneer challenges, Saturday and Sunday Modern challenges. And let's start with the Saturday Pioneer event. Just looking at the top 8, first place, Mardu Greasefang by Spock Vidaloka.
Yeah, this deck's good. So this is the Mardu variant, right? Not the Esper variant.
Sure.
Yeah. And so
agreed.
Yes. Well, I've heard a lot of people say that they prefer the Esper version of this deck, but whenever I'm playing against the Mardu version in Explorer especially, it's so consistent and so brutal. Like there's just so many ways with it to get cards in the graveyard, like Blood Tokens and Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Stitcher's Supplier. They're all helping you out there. And then if you happen to remove their Greasefang when they resolve it, then they have ways to get that back onto the battlefield. Like Can't Stay Away, which operates from both hand and then from the graveyard, so you could just effectively get 2 cards for 1. Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord, can recur Greasefang as well. And that's pretty annoying, especially because Greasefang has 3 power and it's 3 mana. So it avoids like the instant speed removal that would be in red by default. It avoids Fatal Push without Revolt. And so that's just pretty brutal. And then, sideboard, you'll have your removal taken out of your hand with Thoughtseize. They make sure the coast is clear. If you have any like creature counter magic or something like that, then that works. And then I think this deck pivots to a solid mid-range plan just fine out of the sideboard. Like it has Graveyard Trespassers, Thoughtseizes, Go Blanks, which is just a high value card for grindy matchups. Portable Hole is good for small permanent removal. Fatal Push out of the board to go up to a full 4. And I think this deck can win just a normal game of Magic.
Yeah. Between this and Winota, because doesn't Grafdigger's Cage shut down Winota's trigger?
Yes. So Cage would stop this and stop Winota.
Yeah. So between this, Winota and Izzet Phoenix, like I feel like Cage is just kind of the premier graveyard hate card right now.
Yeah, it might be being underplayed. Of course, this deck has ways to remove that permanent, but it does kind of rely on a portable hole or something like that.
Yeah.
It's weird to me that this one versus the Esper one is pretty interesting too, just because it's so much more mid-rangey, I guess. And the Esper one has, you miss out on that. What's the blue-black card that we told Stan was terrible?
We know the one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one.
Yeah.
Spill the juice.
Spill the juice. Yeah, you miss out on Spill the Juice. So you don't have that instant speed discard. I mean, it's fascinating though to see the cards that they chose here. You know, you get Fable, which is nice. The red cards are Blood Makers, basically Voldaren Epicure and Blood Tithe Harvester, and then Kroxa and one Lightning Axe.
Mhm.
And I guess that the big payoff here really is the blood creatures that give you a stable way to make sure that you can discard a card all the time.
Yeah, it's super reliable in terms of the discard outlet end of things. And they're also just doing damage on the battlefield. It's one of those things where it's like you could hold up removal forever against the Greasefang, and they can just kind of chip you to death with even Voldaren Epicure for a couple turns, plus the 1 damage it does on ETB. And then Blood Tithe Harvester is a 3 damage, 2-power creature. So
I think the other thing interesting is that this is like the best performance we've seen for this deck. And it's not even on the Pioneer metagame page for or on MTG Goldfish yet. And if you look at like past results, it's a lot of league performances. And like the Sunday Challenge only had one Mardu Greasefang deck in 15th place. And then otherwise, like, it's not necessarily like dominating these events. It's just kind of this league mainstay that I think we have a disproportionately high exposure to because we're also playing Explorer, where it's more popular.
it probably experiences some splash hate from Naya or Winota, like you said, Stan, where it's like people probably have more cages per deck than they have on Explorer, especially now that people don't have to worry about Naya as much in Explorer. So they're going to shave that even more. And I think that potentially Mono Green Ramp has a better way to lock out Greasefang, perhaps, or like tutor up things out of the sideboard. And Mono Green Ramp is just effectively not the same deck at all in Explorer. So I could be wrong there, but that's one thing I'm thinking about just because of the way that, I mean, Karn also stops the crewing of, of the artifact Parhelion itself. So that's kind of a big deal.
Second place, we've got Island Go Same with Mono Red Aggro, which is, at least this list, full of questionable cards that you kind of have to play. It's a couple of Spikefield Hazards, 3 Lightning Strike. It's so annoying. So I think there's a couple of reasons why you why you play these cards. Spikefield Hazard, I think this just is a concession to how powerful turn 1 mana dorks are in the format right now.
Yeah, especially if you want to make your Winota matchup any good at all. It's good to have a couple extra cards for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt that it's like, in a pinch, it's a land, but it's also just a prowess trigger. Like if you're against a really slow deck and you just want to get some damage in, or like you said, the mana dorks or small creatures, why not?
Yeah. Yeah, and then Shane, you pointed out that Lightning Strike hits Greasefang, which I think is also important enough, perhaps.
Literally the only reason the card is here, I think, is because of that fact.
Third place, Boros Aggro by Hamuda, featuring a new card, Illuminator Virtuoso from New Capenna. This is a 1-and-a-white human rogue, 1/1 double strike, and when it becomes a target of a spell you control, it connives. So you loot, and then if you discard a non-land card, you put a 1/1 counter on the Virtuoso.
Yeah, another value connive target. Why not?
Hey, yeah. I also thought it was interesting that this list is essentially unchanged from the Luris version of the deck, except it has some feathers in the sideboard now.
Yeah, it's got a couple other new cards from the last time I paid attention to it, namely Homestead Courage, which is not a card that I saw before Midnight Hunt, but it's a cheap card to put a counter on. It's got flashback, so I think that's a nice card for this deck as well. I'm excited to try this deck. Honestly, this is the type of, I was playing Feather before, then Luris came along, made it not great. Now I get to try it again.
Yeah, it actually had a decent weekend, so maybe there's more to Boros Aggro than meets the eye. Fourth place, Thasgar playing Mono Green Devotion. I did not notice any new cards in this big green deck.
Up to 2 Pelucranos, World Eater. Always happy to see more Pelucranos in my life. But yeah, more or less, it's mono green.
Fifth place, Stream on Izzet Phoenix. 4 Phoenix, 4 Ledger, 19 lands, and 33 spells.
Looks like Phoenix. Looks like the new Phoenix.
The weirdest thing to me about this deck still is how many 2s and 1s and 3s there are in these Phoenix lists right now. It's wild. 1 Charted Course, 3 Strangle, 2 Spell Pierce, 1 Flame Blessed Bolt, 2 Treasure Cruise, 2 Temporal Trespass, 3 pieces of the puzzle. It's wild.
Is 1 Charted Course kind of where this deck has turned to in Pioneer?
I'm not sure overall, but yeah, it's a lot of just a lot of non-complete play sets. This is a very ugly deck list. It's either completely tuned or somebody who's trying a lot of stuff out. I suspect it's probably completely tuned.
I mean, it's also easier to play 1s, 2s, and 3s when you have 8 1-mana cantrips.
Exactly.
And 4 expressive iteration to just tear through your deck and find everything that you need. All right, 6th place, Naya Winota. Dave, you're going to like this. Nice clean list, all 4 ofs.
Perfect, except for that Kenrith.
Except 1 of Kenrith. This is basically the main deck that I played for our dive down section.
Sweet.
7th place, back from the dead, it's Bant Spirits, played by Deject. Spooky Friends, only green card is Coco. Spellqueller is another seemingly good answer to both Winota and Greasefang.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I mean, yeah, you keep up mana. You have other options you have for flashing things in. Like, I guess if you have Rattle Chains down, everything does. And you could always do Coco.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big key to Spirits is Rattle Chains and protect it so that you can play at instant speed is a huge part of your game plan, regardless of what variant you're doing at this point. I know on an early episode where we talk about Spirits, I said Rattle Chains wasn't a big deal. I'm very wrong. I was very wrong. 2 or 3 years ago, it's one of the best cards in the deck. It's basically Cryptic Command. So,
Well, big of you to finally admit that, Dave.
It's too bad that, like, this is one of the decks that I look at and really want, of course, I mean, people talk about this all the time, but I really want more of these tools to end up in Explorer sooner rather than later. So we get Spell Queller and Selfless Spirit and Mausoleum Wanderer all missing in action right now.
All right, and then finally in 8th place, we got Winota. Pretty similar to the 6th place list, except it's running 3 Fables to make room for a 1 of Selfless Spirit. Little extra protection to keep your Winota sticking around, or your Mana Dorks, and another Winota enabler as well.
Right on.
If you look at the actual metagame, Winota and Rakdos were the 2 most popular decks in the format, or at least in the top 32 of this event. Between the 2 of them, they account for 25% of the field.
Wowee.
Yeah, we didn't see any Rakdos in the top 8, but pretty top heavy there. Likewise, the next most popular deck was in fact Mono Red Aggro.
Yeah, this doesn't really surprise me. I feel like people feel like Rakdos midrange is kind of safe. I think people like kind of dipping their toes back into Pioneer or just being like, hey, I can play a style of deck like this and do decently, probably, based on what I'm seeing on the MTG Goldfish and stuff like that. Might as well just play it. And then Mono Red Aggro, there's always going to be fans of that style of deck too. So
here's one that actually kind of stood out to me. The most played card in the top 32 was Fable of the Mirror Breaker with 33 copies.
That card's good.
This is very not surprising to me. Gotta be honest.
Go on.
I just feel like anecdotally, since Explorer started, since I started playing a little bit more Pioneer and stuff, it's like every deck runs Fable of the Mirror Breaker. It's like the best cantrip in the format, which is, it's not really a cantrip. It's like the best value engine, I guess, in the format. It's 3 mana for 2 creatures and draw 2, discard 2 is just absurd.
Is this a fair card?
I
mean,
would
it's the
define it
ultimate
as a fair card. Yeah.
This is a fair card? Yeah. I wonder if this is just like the best fair card right now.
I think it's the best fair card in like Pioneer and Explorer for sure.
Right. Sure. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Well, the best fair card is probably
Expressive Iteration.
And then this one's 1 color, so you can put it in more decks.
I mean, Expressive Iteration didn't even scratch the top 10 most played cards.
Yeah.
Well, clearly it's terrible, so let's just
ship them, sell them all to me. Who wants to sell me your Expressive Iterations?
Yeah.
All right, Stan, I'll give you a breather while we go through the Sunday Pioneer Challenge. How about that? Because it's not as interesting.
Please do.
Although we do start with the deck I just said was totally adequate, but sometimes you get there. We get Rakdos midrange by Zerk in first place. Value pile. No Ob Nixilis in the side, which I think is no Ob Nixilis in the 75 altogether, which I think is probably where you want to be with this deck. I think you have enough tools against control decks to get there where you don't just sort of need, hey, if I have Ob Nixilis, I'm even better against control. Like you have Planeswalkers and you have hand interaction and Fable the Mirror Breaker and all that good stuff. So you're pretty well insulated there. Second place, we have Citizen of Nerdvana on Winota. Looks like Winota, pretty similar to one of the other lists I think we saw in Saturday. Singleton Blade Historian, no Kenrith.
Yeah, do you all know, well, I guess maybe Stan will talk about this later, the difference between running Kenrith and running Blade Historian is that seems to be like the one-ofs that people are trying. That's what I noticed in the first list versus this one. And the ones I've played against Blade Historian a bunch of times, it seems like.
So although I did not play with Blade Historian, Kenrith is just kind of a strong beater on its own that can generate value if you have additional mana, whereas Blade Historian, a little easier to kill, a little easier to cast, but it also just makes your entire board hit harder. So with a good Winota hit and one that includes Blade Historian, you're a bit more likely to just like win on the spot, whereas Kenrith might set you up to take like an extra turn to swing again, assuming your opponent doesn't scoop.
Third place, we have Scouter TF2 on the Boros aggro deck that we talked about on Saturday. Fourth place, we have Izzet Prowess. This is a deck I believe I talked a little bit about last week, and it seems like it is sweeping the nation this week. It's the Swift Spear, Soulscar Mage, Ledger Shredder, Sprite Dragon, and a pile of cheap Izzet spells, including Reckless Rage for your Unholy Heat type effect. Nowhere near as good as Unholy Heat, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a good deck, doing well here with Stomp the Horizon in fourth place. Fifth place, we have Poker's Wizard. I haven't heard that name in a minute, but they are back here. Fifth place, again, with Boros aggro. This is a slightly different looking list, but still extremely similar. Has the 4 Illuminator Virtuoso for that easy connive trigger. Then in sixth place, we have Pascal Maynard on Mono Blue Spirit. So Pascal likes this deck enough. You know what's funny is, like, I thought for some reason that like this wasn't actually Pascal Maynard. Like someone just uses Pascal's name as their Magic Online handle, but I think it actually is Pascal, right? I mean, no one would be doing this well unless they were actually Pascal.
Probably not.
So yeah, Mono Blue Spirits doing quite well. This is a deck that I know you've been interested in or playing a little bit, right, Dave?
Yeah,
or you've
definitely.
only been doing that in Explorer.
But this is so close to Explorer, especially when you get to this. I mean, Mausoleum Wanderer is in this list. Of course, that's not an Explorer, but I think almost everything else in here, in the main deck at least, is.
Yeah.
Stan, you've been playing this too, right?
Yeah, just on Arena though.
A card I've been seeing pop up in some of these lists, also in kind of the Izzet Prowess-y style builds, is a Fading Hope.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a card that I don't remember talking about. It's an instant single blue mana, return target creature to its owner's hand. If the mana value is 3 or less, scry 1. So it's kind of a Vapor Snag type effect, but you also get value with a scry instead of the opponent loses 1 life or controller loses 1 life, whatever that is. So it can save your own creatures with scry value. It can remove your opponent's creatures. It also works against Greasefang to buy you like a turn.
Sometimes that's enough, especially for spirits where you just have such a strong attack sometimes.
Dave, can we take a second to acknowledge Zoomer Shane calling that a Vapor Snag effect?
I know, come on.
So clearly an unsummon.
Oh yeah, my bad.
Alpha card, man. Alpha card.
Shane, if you want me to buy you like beer and cigarettes sometimes, just let me know. It's no trouble.
How about both? All right, 7th place, we got Ardos on Mono Green Walkers. Looks like Mono Green Walkers to me. 8th place, we have Hirotsukai on Mono Blue Spirits.
Okay.
So we've got 2 Mono Blue Spirits in the top 8 alone.
Worth noting, we might be looking at the meta breakdown of this one in a minute. Yes, we are. But the Bant Spirits was 6.3% of the top 32 of the previous event as well. And it looks like Mono Blue Spirits is 6.3% of this one as well, which places it squarely in the kind of like top 10 of decks right now. So I feel like people are picking up spirits all over the place right now. I mean, Hirotsukai is still really doing the best with it consistently, but lots more players are starting to have results.
Yeah. I mean, it's frustrating to play against. I think it is one of those decks that you can get really good at, right? Because there's a lot of tricky lines, tricky interactions, knowing when to deploy threats, hold stuff back, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Witness protection. Got a play set of those.
Right on.
Speaking of this metagame breakdown, Shane, I'm taking umbrage. You said that this tournament isn't as interesting. I disagree, man. The top deck in this event was Izzet Prowess.
Yeah, I mean that outside the top 32 stuff gets. I mean, excuse me, inside the top 32 stuff gets interesting. Outside the top 8, yeah, Izzet Prowess I think is a huge up and comer in the format. People are seeing results and identifying that it's a cool deck with a cool game plan. So I'm all for it. I enjoy it.
Yeah, in fact, I think on the heels of Izzet Prowess, Swift Spear was the most played card in this event. And it's just
Ooh.
like, if you look at the top cards, it's Swift Spear, Consider, Opt, Soulscar Mage, Ledger Shredder, Play with Fire, Reckless Rage, Dispute, Expressive Iteration, Red
Sure,
Cat Melee.
Were you only filtering by those decks, Dan?
No,
Is that
no.
a filter you can do?
Yes. But yeah, this was like the Izzet tournament, it feels like. Because in addition to Prowess, there is also a couple Izzet Phoenix decks.
Yeah. So I want to quickly point out a couple cool decks inc for Pioneer. We're not going to go too deep in them because we want to talk about Modern as well. But I saw a 17th place deck from Claudio running Jund midrange, not Claudio to Light or Niv to Claudio or however you want to call it. But I don't even know how to get into this list because it's just like it's all over the place. It's a lot of 1 and 2 ofs.
Well, one thing I would suggest is, so the mid-range deck that we talk about a lot is Rakdos. How different is this than Rakdos? Just so people understand.
Pretty different.
It's pretty different, right? Like I'm looking at the list right now. It's pretty extremely different, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely running some interesting choices with a couple Cedar Wayfinder, a Singleton Bloodthirsty Adversary, a Singleton Scavenging Ooze, a Gloom Shrieker, which is just like a 3 mana 2/1 that does like a recursion of target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. I'm like looking for some kind of combo that I'm missing, but I think it's just like high value, where it's just like there's Traverse the Uvenwald, there's Ishkana Graph Widow, Kalidas, Singleton Tireless Tracker, Singleton Clothis. So I think it can be like recur permanents like that are of high value out of your graveyard, perhaps, and then like or traverse for them. It's a wild one.
Wild. I'm looking at this, and when I glanced at it, I was like, is Lutri in the sideboard? There's so many one-ofs in this deck.
Yeah, I'm curious. I didn't see Claudio tweet about this, but I'm curious going to their Twitter and just being like, did they say anything about this deck? And Stan, you had to see this Golgari Elves list in 27th place on the Saturday Challenge, right?
I saw it, or I guess you could say I've seen it.
Yeah. Thoughts?
Looks cool. Yeah, I mean...
4 Gala Greeters.
4 Gala Greeters. And I think that's probably the most interesting thing here, combining Greeters with both Dwinnen's Elite as well as Elvish Warmaster, just to, I think, trigger them like crazy. I also really like that this is running a playset of Steel Leaf Champion, although I never had success with Elves and Pioneer. In the earliest days of Pioneer, I did brew with it a little bit when it was like the true Wild West format. And I did always find that like a turn 2 Steel Leaf Champion was actually kind of just a good enough threat in a lot of matchups, both because it's hard to remove and has some built-in evasion against other early creatures. So I think we're actually been seeing a little bit more Elves and Pioneer just kind of like on the outskirts of these challenges and appearing in leagues. So maybe there's some further iteration to be done here to make it a more reliable aggro deck that wins with Shaman of the Pack sometimes. The one thing I'll add here is the thing that I'm a little surprised is missing is Circle of Dreams Druid as like a big mana engine, because that's your Elvish Archdruid impersonator. Though it's not a Lord, and it only has 1 toughness.
Mm-hmm.
It does tap for a lot of mana if it sticks around, but maybe there's too much mono red and Phoenix and Prowess running around right now to actually let that thing stick around.
All right. You think we have time for 1 or 2 of these Modern challenges?
We should do it.
Let's do it.
Saturday Modern Challenge, first place, Murktide Regent, shaving a Dragon's Rage Channeler, and also making room for 2 Ledger Shredders. There's another deck that's been flowing around that I think is like 13th place in either the Saturday or Sunday challenge, which is cutting all DRCs for 4 Shredders and like a Snapcaster Mage.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is a pretty cool combo.
Wow.
But yeah.
I mean, Ledger Shredder, people are starting to love it. I even saw Michael Rapp, Shadow Scientist, today talking about how he's been playing Murktide a lot lately. And he said that he felt like he wants more Ledger Shredders than Murktides in the deck. Like he wants to cut Ledger Shredder or Murktides to fit more Ledger Shredders. I was like, wow, okay.
$15 card, by the way. $15.
$15 now? Oh my God.
Cool.
I still need 1 more.
Second place, Canister on 4-color Living End. Deck seems good. All right, here's I think probably the most interesting deck from the weekend. Third place, Selesnial on Naya combos.
And what are those combos, Stan?
Well, it's just all the combos, Dave.
All the Naya combos, such as
Splinter Twin?
We have Splinter Twin, except it's Kiki Jiki plus Felidar Guardian. But we also have Plain Bound Accomplice with Vivian on the Hunt. We've got Devoted Druid plus Luxior, Gyada's Gift. Why not play 4 Karn the Great Creator for, the liquid metal coating wombo combo?
Or Luxior out of the board, too.
Yeah, and there's another Luxior on the board. Doesn't Karma Guide do something with the Vivian combo as well, or is that a whole other combo?
Yeah, Karma Guide is part of the Vivian combo, yeah.
Gotcha. I don't even know what to say. Good cards, good pile, 3 Bolt, 1 Unholy Heat.
Yeah, I love this deck. It's only 60 cards. Main deck, I don't have to do like a Yorian thing. I can just actually play a normal deck, or if you can call this deck normal.
It's just an incredible idea, I feel like, to just take all these combos that sort of have half good cards in them together and putting it together and seeing how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And feels like maybe it goes okay. It does feel like the Plainbound Accomplice Vivian combo is pretty like fragile in this one. Like there's not a ton of, there's no redundant pieces in it. It's like if you start the chain and they kill one of your creatures, you're just off onto your other plan, which maybe is okay. But a lot of backup plans. You can just switch from that over into Devoted Druid. You can switch from that over into Karn if you need to, and just try to Walking Ballista someone to death if you get a bunch of mana going. So there's just a lot of different things to go with.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that this doesn't have Saheeli Rai. It's almost like, why not have the Felidar Guardian Saheeli combo thing go on?
There's only one Felidar, though, so I think that if you want it, you want kind of all the pieces of that to get a little extra value.
Is Vivian good on her own?
I feel like this list might hinge on Vivian being passable on her own. You know what I mean? Where it's like, okay, maybe occasionally I just do this and play her minus where I make a warrior, and that's enough for me to block something else to like buy some time. So maybe you, in a deck like this, you get to use more pieces of Vivian instead of just trying to like turbo pod, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, you still have a lot of ramp in this deck. You've got a Noble Hierarch, you've got Ragavan, and you've got Devoted Druid, which you can play as kind of a bad elf if you want to. And you can even minus, put a counter on it for value and just not use it twice in a turn and not worry about the fact that you're close to killing it to be able to push things out faster if you want to. So, you can see how the pieces fit together
if you choose to look.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, would you ever pick up? This is not on anyone here's radar. Am I right?
I don't have Reddit 6.
But you have a Mana Traders rental account.
I do. I'm curious about this one. I can afford it on Magic Online, so might as well give it a spin. What's worse that could happen?
Yeah, I kind of
fun. The worst thing that could happen is fun.
That is not an option, David. Yeah, maybe one of us should play this for next week, and another one should play Murktide Region with just Ledger Shredders.
No Murktides even.
And then Dave can, go
Take
camping again.
Yeah.
All right, 4th place, Ganyanshin on Yawgmoth combo. Still good. 5th place, Whedon on Mono Green Tron. The main deck looks pretty typical. The sideboard, Shane, also relatively typical.
Yeah, I think the main deck's a little bit interesting. It's running a couple Thragtusk and 2 Walking Ballista. No Wormcoil Engine, which I think is a little bit weird. I think maybe just the prevalence of exile-based removal. You just want a little bit more value with your Thragtusk there. Getting life's good.
Not as much burn, right? Probably means there's not much burn in this metagame at all, so it makes it a little bit.
But then why play Thragtusk, which is harder to cast?
Just for the extra creature if they exile it somehow. I don't know. I also I think this deck is built well for the metagame. It's got a gut shot in the side. It's got 3 warping whales. It's got good ways to take care of early creatures and then do Tron things, stabilize, and take over the end game.
Do Tron things. 4th place, 4-color Blink, played by Respect the Cat. This is not the Elementals deck. It does have 2 Eldamri's Call, though. Fetch up an Omnath or an Endurance, or another good card if you need to. 7th place, Death and Taxes.
What?
Now this is Yorian Taxes. I mean, it's a lot of what you'd expect from a Taxes deck. The biggest thing that kind of clicked for me here from looking at this list that is obvious, but I hadn't really considered before, is that they're shaving Path to play March of Otherworldly Light. And in a deck like this, a monocolor deck like this, March of Otherworldly Light makes a lot of sense because you can't play Prismatic Kending.
Right.
So even though they do have a couple path because of how well it synergizes with Lean and Arbiter, March being just like this catch-all answer that, you know, you can pitch some of your extra cards to as well. Like if you have like a Dead Solitude or rather a Dead Skyclave Apparition, or maybe, you know, an extra Thalia. Seems like this is the type of thing that, you know, some of these white taxes decks perhaps needed, is a little extra power in the form of a March of Otherworldly Light to not be so reliant on just path to exile removal. And then finally, 8th place, Murktide Regent, another 2 Ledger Shredder version.
Importantly, piloted by Grixis Man. Staying in there in 2 of their 3 colors at least.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say about the overall top 32 is that even though we mentioned one Yawgmoth deck, it was the most played deck, or the most prevalent deck in the top 32, 12.5% of the field.
Wow.
However, very diverse top 32 here, like Murktide Regent, Blue Living End, Mono Green Tron Elementals, Ponza, like a lot of 2s, a lot of 1s and 2s in this tournament. So even though the top 8, I think, had a lot of familiar strategies, the tournament was pretty diverse. So that's always exciting to see. Even had a Ponza in there.
Yeah, so many. There's more than 50% of this metagame are made up by 1s.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's breeze to this last one. Why don't we? We have nothing to talk about in the dive down, so this one's
there's good players in this one too.
Yeah, this is straightforward. We've got first place Conus on Elementals, the new premier deck of Modern. I'd say it seems like it's cementing itself as the deck that good players want to play, and have a 1,100 ticket Mana Traders rental account, because my goodness, is that expensive. But yeah, Elementals doing elemental things. Interestingly, there's like kind of, you know, there's a lot of 1 and 2 ofs here. There's a couple like Ice Fangs and Endurances and Obsidian Charmaw, interestingly, and Titania. But yeah, this deck is, you know, go over the top, just tons of value. I was watching Spike play today against a deck like this, and I was reminded about how good tutors can be. Like Eladamri's Call, just peeling necessary tools out of the deck just works so well, especially as the game goes long and you just get exactly what you need, whether it's an Omnath or a Solitude or a Fury or something like that. It just does a lot of work, having effectively 8 copies of a needed card. Second place, we have Batutina on Elementals as well. Slightly different list here. This is so I'm looking at this. What are you noticing? It looks like it's just kind of more play sets of Elementals. We've got 4 Fury, 4 Solitude, 4 Omnath, 4 Risen Reef, a few, you know, odds and ends like an Endurance and a Magus of the Moon and things like that. But this is just kind of looking for elemental value.
Yeah, just like less 1s and 2s. You know, you don't have like the weird Ice Fangs or Titanias or Charmaws here. Just mostly 4 of the good cards, and then Eldamri's Call and some removal to round it out.
Right on. Third place, Plato Nguyen on Golgari Yawgmoth, splashing red for a main deck, Magus of the Moon. Then fourth place, we have Mr. Coffeyet on Azorius Control, which looks like a control deck to me. I don't know if you noticed anything that made it not look like a control deck. Of course, it's a control deck. It's Mr. Coffeyet.
Yeah, this is a pretty, what I would expect, stock list.
And then, interestingly, right behind Mr. Coffeyet is, I think, the exact same deck, even though it's called Jeskai Control. Right below it on MTG Goldfish, it's Watu. It is Wafotapo himself on Azorius Control. So that's kind of, I've never seen these two players back to back like this. I think they're testing partners and friends and things like that.
Wasn't there like a rumor that it's the same, that Mr. Capulet was Watu's alt account?
Well, now we know this can't be the case. I mean, I guess it potentially could be if it's on 2 separate computers, but
here's the wildest thing is that Watu is running 1 more Memory Deluge and 1 less Fire and Ice in the main deck, which is fine. But in the sideboard, one thing that makes this deck more Jeskai is there is a single copy of an uncommon from Battle for Zendikar called Crumble to Dust.
Oh, that's like a land destruction spell, right?
Yeah,
it's colorless.
It's devoid.
It's devoid. It's Sowing Salt. We call it a Sowing Salt effect. It's which was in Urza's Destiny, I think. The one with the vial. And this is the devoid version of that card.
All right, 6th place, we have 8 cast affinity style deck, doing affinity style things, flooding the board, drawing some cards. 7th place, we have Blam Cat on Indomitable Creativity, doing Indomitable Creativity things, casting some crab tokens, making some other tokens and creativitying them into what? Emrakul, Sarah's Emissary, stuff like that?
Yeah, it's worth both. Generally, you want both.
Oh, okay, I'll take both.
It's worth noting that this is the 4-color version and not some other kind of faster version, and there's no Archon in this one, which had become the payoff of choice for a while, and now this deck is more Sarah Emrakul.
And then
Nahiri as well. We got a Nahiri the Harbinger in case you want to old school it and get your Emrakul too.
Man, that's such a good way to do it. And then 8th place, we have Burn. It is like the Burn deck. Interestingly, it has 2 Core Firewalker and 1 Sanctifier on Vex side, kind of splitting the difference there. But yeah, looks like what Burn looks like these days.
I don't know why you play Sanctifier right now, like unless it's just for the graveyard hate. Because it used to be such a powerhouse against red-black decks, and those are effectively non-existent right now.
Yeah,
maybe that's
point.
why we're only playing one.
Is it good against Living End? Is it medium against Living End? You get rid of some of the creatures, but not all of them.
Yeah, I mean, like some of your best creatures in Living End are blue.
Right.
So it gets rid of Grief and Architect of Will are the big ones.
And I guess Street Wraith.
Street Wraith, sure. I don't think one Sanctifier in Vec is solving Burn's problems with Living End, however.
No, I don't think so either.
Have
you guys seen that new
probably are.
That new meme that's going around with like the tank? It's like from an old infomercial where it's a big tank of water with water spewing out of the side of it, and then it was kind of like you put tape over it to like close the hole in the tank, and it's like my bad matchup, one main deck brazen borrower,
Yes.
kind of like patching over it. I keep seeing it for all these different cards now. I guess one sideboard Sanctifier in Vec is a version of that meme as well.
That's all you need, man. Just one. All right. We have 4 tournaments, 1 breakdown. That's kind of a lot. So I hope you stuck with us. You guys ready to head into the dive down? Talk about some actual playing experiences versus other people's?
Yeah, first, can we do a quick commercial break and talk about some of our shaving stories?
Oh, yeah, of course. I've got a good one, so stay with us.
This is kind of an awkward question, but does someone here smell amazing?
Are you the woman at the grocery store this weekend? I was with my wife, by the way, so I wasn't just getting hit on. Not just getting hit on. But yeah, I had my first what are you wearing in the wild thing happen for I can't even remember the last time that happened with anything. But I got a fresh drop from Barrister and Mann. Will sent over some sandalwood shaving soap, some sandalwood shaving balm. I got the Lava Nil the soap as well. And yeah, so I of course I immediately was like, oh yeah, I can't wait to use this. Busted out the sandalwood, did the little, did the shaving, did the application of the stuff. And I was like, that smelled pretty good. But I didn't smell it on myself. And then we go out to the grocery store and this woman's like, we saw her like once or twice. And she's like, look, I got to ask y'all, I know this is probably weird, but is one of you wearing something that smells really good? My wife's like, yeah, that's a shaving soap. We just got it today. And I was like, yeah, this is, Will's going to love this. This is a good commercial.
And you were like, excuse me, use the code dive down 2022, all one word, to be able to get a discount on your first purchase, lady at the grocery store.
15% off your first order, lady at the grocery store. If you like sandalwood, then go for that. But so yeah, that is my honest review of the week. People, even strangers, like it. But Stan, you said you had a story.
Well, my story is I also got a new drop featuring several products from the Behold the What's-This line of fragrances.
I got a couple of those.
I'm so jealous. I want to know what that smells like.
I'll tell you exactly what it smells like. It smells like candied fruit. It's like it's like the perfect summer fragrance because it's like kind of sweet, very light. And I like it a lot. I got the shaving soap and the aftershave balm. So I feel good. It's deep in my pores. I finished work early. I shaved and then I went skating and I could just feel the What's-This aroma in the breeze behind me.
Just a scent trail.
Yeah, it's really nice. Not too strong, very fruity in a good way.
I just imagined a Dr. Seuss-esque drawing of you skating with smell lines coming off of you, which would fit so well with the art for Behold the What's-This.
Yeah. And the nice thing about this particular scent is that Barrister Man, for every $1 per jar of soap and $2 per bottle of aftershave balm, will be donated to the Children's Literacy Initiative, which is a nonprofit that works with teachers to advance and improve early literacy in the United States.
Oh, that's dope.
Limited edition, nice smell, and part of the proceeds go to a really great cause.
I think the label says that it smells of, it's like sunshine.
Grapefruit, rose, and childhood memories.
Childhood memories, yeah. I was like, oh, that's nice.
So yeah, as Dave mentioned, 50% off your first order by using coupon code The Dive Down 2022 at Barrister and Man MANN. They've got soaps, they've got shaving soaps, they've got aftershave balms, lotions, all that kind of good stuff for you, your loved ones, your home. So help us out, help Will out, and we appreciate it. So Stanislav,
Shanislav?
you mentioned that you have been playing. You mentioned that you've been playing, perhaps Pioneer Enemy number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Did it for science and perhaps for some tickets and treasure chests on Magic Online. You played Pioneer Naya Winota. Is that correct? Were you lying to me?
Shane, I lie to a lot of people, never you.
Well, I appreciate it. So yeah, what was inspiring you for this?
So here's what happened. Winota got banned in Explorer, and I noticed 2 things. One, the community generally rejoiced over the news.
Yeah.
The second thing is that a lot of people went as far as to say that it should have just been removed from Pioneer as well. And I think, as you put it, like, a lot of people kind of resent the deck's presence and power in the format just because it's so format defining. It's kind of like perhaps the first deck you have to have a plan for, or at least that's the sentiment I picked up. So in the spirit of fun and as it turns out profit, I decided to run a version of Naya Winota through a Pioneer League to see what happened. And just for context, the one I played is really similar to the 6th place list from the Sunday challenge, which is just like all 4 ofs except for 1 Kenrith. And I got to tell you guys, I snapped off a pretty quick 4-1.
And just, even though people know it, people expect it, you're just like, whatever. Deal with Winota.
It's true. And I came rather close to getting that trophy. I lost match 5 to Niv to Light, where I was absolutely bodied. Just not even close. Pile of removal and sweepers and like a big 6/6 fire. It was just a little too much for me.
So I believe we all play this deck a long time ago when we were testing Pioneer.
Gosh, did we even do a deck dive on it, or maybe not?
We did. I mean, it was a different build at that point in time.
Yes,
I think the one
yeah,
I
different.
played had Agent of Treachery in it and stuff. Like,
Right, and we played like Angrath's Marauders, which was, I
Good.
mean, it's different not just in build, but like the outcome of your Winota triggers were different because the Marauders builds would sometimes generate these turns where you're dealing 100 damage. And I think I even like had like a screenshot where it was like in Pioneer and I got my opponent to like -100 because of some crazy Marauders nonsense. This version does not do that. And it doesn't need to.
Yeah, so interestingly here, I feel like the human targets are pretty good, right? But they're not as like game breaking as I feel like they were when it was like, here's a bunch of Kenriths, here's a bunch of the Marauders and things like that, where it's like we're not cheating really high mana things, but we do of course have 4 Tovolar's Huntmaster. We talked about that card previous weeks. A 6/6 that also makes 2/2 Green Wolf tokens along for the ride. Pretty darn good in terms of being flashed onto the battlefield. But tell me a little bit more about the threats that you liked seeing, Stan, or do you want to like get into other details before we kind of dive into the deck construction?
Well, I structured my experiences into a segment.
Ooh,
that
I love your segments.
Yeah, it's another classic Stan segment, and this one is titled 5 Hot Takes About Naya Winota based on a single league I did with it Saturday night.
perfect. You know I love snappy branding, and I really got to say, you pulled it off.
Look, if we can't make blanket statements based off of a small sample size, then are we truly Magic players?
I'm not.
We're definitely not podcasters if we don't.
That's right. Yeah, my wife went to a birthday party. My child was asleep. I fired off a league. And here's what I learned. The first thing that stood out to me, and these are in no particular order, and these are just like notes that I jotted down. I think there's been a lot of spilled ink about this deck. People talk about it a lot. So I kind of just wanted to provide some more in-depth experiences I had, because I'm going to operate under the assumption that people generally know what this deck does. This is not a deck dive per se. But the first thing that I learned during a mirror match, in fact, that I won, is the new Kiki Jiki, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, but specifically the Reflection of Kiki Jiki side, is a protection spell. This card just keeps getting better and better. Most people know that Winota has to be killed on sight. And unless you're running the Selfless Spirit version, for instance, most decks are playing, some type of specific removal spells that are really efficient against Winota. Like, these are some of those 1-mana red spells that just deal 4 at instant speed. But if you're playing this deck right, you basically only need to swing with Winota one time just to establish either a winning line or to establish a board that's probably just going to win on the crackback. And one way to protect Winota, I found, is to copy her with the Reflection in response to an opponent's removal spell.
Makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and it's like, it does make a ton of sense, but I think that's just one more application for Fable that I did not realize until I had the Reflection up and someone pointed a removal spell at Winota. And then you just choose the copy to stick around because of Legend rule, one of them would die. It also has haste, so you get to attack with it. And then either they have to spend a whole other removal spell on the copy, effectively 2-for-1ing themselves, or it just clears the way for you to swing with, your mana dorks or whatever else in hopes of finding a Winota off the Winota trigger, along with whatever other win cons you find. So Fable, good card. Beware of this. This is like another must-kill card in this deck.
Yeah.
In a deck full of must-kill cards.
I mean, I think one of the other things that I've noticed in this deck and others is just the treasure token allows you just to ramp out spells like a turn earlier sometimes, or when people aren't expecting it, or to double spell. And yeah, just that Goblin Shaman making a treasure token can be super valuable in case you miss a land drop or anything like that.
Yeah, it especially pairs really well with Esika's Chariot. Just because you don't even have to attack with that Shaman. Like, if you don't want it to die on blocks, you can attack with your Chariot and then just copy it. And then in a future turn, if you need to generate a ton of mana, or maybe you've built up a bunch of tokens with your Chariot, or you just need to generate a ton of Winota triggers, like, you just sort of get to have your cake and eat it too.
By the way, guess how much the real Goblin Shaman token costs to purchase?
$6.
$4.50.
Cool.
It's a lot of money. I'm going to be
using look around and find one of those.
I'm using
the token is also
dogs.
rare. Is the thing.
What?
So the tokens match the rarity of the card that they generate?
No.
Yes.
Supposedly they do.
Yeah. Well, I believe in conspiracy theories. So for that reason, like, the drop rate of this token is allegedly as rare as, like, or relative to other tokens.
Wild.
If you feel me.
Yes, they put the tokens that only go with rares at a lesser drop rate, because that would be annoying for people cracking a box that do limited.
All right, here's my second hot take. Esika's Chariot plus Winota is Splinter Twin.
Okay, how's a Splinter Twin?
So Chariot making a couple tokens provides up to 3 Winota enablers in and of itself. And since Winota has 4 power, you can use her to equip the Chariot, which then gives you those 3 creatures, which is, Chariot plus 2 casts to attack and trigger her.
Yeah.
And three triggers I want to point out is actually frequently good enough to close out the game. And I'm going to talk about those 3 triggers in a upcoming point. But with those 3 triggers, you're practically setting up a Splinter Twin situation when you have both cards on board, because once you attack, you get those 3 triggers. You're like finding up to, I think, 18 power is your ceiling, in addition to the power that's swinging on the board on the spot. The only difference in this case, though, is that Chariot and or Winota are still good without the other because of how well this deck is constructed. So in this case, they're better than Splinter Twin.
I mean, you got to tap down a land with Pestermite, right, Dave?
Sure, that was great.
As good as, yeah, totally as good as Esika's Chariot.
And then you could hit somebody for 2 over and over again.
Yeah, just the thing I kept finding in this league and really playing against this deck is like, in a deck full of must kills, you don't necessarily have to find Winota if you can just like play a Chariot and just keep playing creatures to equip it. As long as it dodges removal, it just takes over the game so quickly.
Yeah, that's like the real issue. And I think I kind of mentioned that in the breakdown segment where it's like Greasefang without Greasefang is pretty mopey, pretty slow. And Winota without Winota is still just a creature beatdown deck.
I just want to say Greasefang without Greasefang is one of my favorite web comics.
God.
Is that like a late 90s, early 2000s one? Like
Like Garfield without Garfield.
Very cynical Gen X ennui comic.
Yeah.
I would even say that Chariot was so good that, like, on some level, I feel like if and when Winota gets banned, I wouldn't be surprised if we see like some kind of green-white, green-red, or Naya deck that just is Chariot plus a lot of other good creatures in those colors doing just fine. Like, just Chariot plus Fable of the Mirror Breaker.
a Gruul aggro style,
yeah,
Naya style.
Like, I think that can be a deck in some condition.
Just Gruul tokens, basically, really.
Yeah, the part though, because this used to be a tokens deck, right? Like when we did our deck dive, episode 74, it was running like Goblin Rabble Masters and Legion War Bosses,
right?
The enablers.
Yeah. To maximize on the non-human.
Right. But Chariot needs 4 power to equip. So if you're going to have like a Chariot non-Winota deck, you kind of have to build around the Chariot, but that's probably an easy problem to solve and not one we're going to do right now. Here's my next take. And another reason why I think this deck is fantastic. It mulls good. Like really, really good.
How so?
I won a game after a mull to 4 just because I kept digging for a solid start of lands plus mana dorks. And I don't want to say that I was mulliganing aggressively for that specific hand, but my first 3 just were not exciting and I didn't feel like it was the right cards to start strong. And then I found 4 that just were living off the top of my deck, but gave me some good early plays.
Yeah.
I played some dorks. I found Winota, and then I won. And I think that sort of speaks to how powerful she is in particular, but also just what this deck is capable of. It's not necessarily a card advantage deck. It's a card quality deck. And you shouldn't necessarily be afraid of pitching hands if like your first play is Brutal Cathar. Or, if you're not doing anything for the first 2 or 3 turns, like you can probably send it back because the most explosive turns and I would say the most decisive games were the ones where I actually had like a really strong start with a turn 1 elf or at least a turn 2 innkeeper that then kind of helped smooth out the rest of my turns moving forward, assuming it stuck around.
But yeah, this is just that kind of deck where I think like you were saying, Stan, which is like the card quality is high and it's not one of the kind of decks that's like trying to cheat on lands to run more creatures or something like that. Like it runs 23 lands. You're going to curve out a good amount of time. You could eventually get to the point where like, yeah, they've killed all your other stuff and then you resolve your Tovolar's Huntmaster and that's going to be enough to do a lot of work for you just at 6 mana. You know what I mean? It's not like that's ridiculous to consider casting in a normal game of Magic. Right,
totally. And Huntmaster is one of those cards where you kind of hate to see it in your opener. So it's a great card to just put on the bottom if you're mulliganing. But then also, just to reiterate, like if your hand is like Huntmasters and Cathars and like maybe even a Fable and not much to do on turns 1 or 2, I think you can just send that back and get away with a stronger hand with fewer cards. Speaking of strong hands, I think one of my biggest level up moments with this deck is kind of understanding what to do with those early turns and what positions I'm trying to get to. So my next hot take is having a lot of Winota triggers is important because you have more enablers than you actually have payoffs. And my single favorite line with this deck was just 3 lands, 2 elves, an innkeeper, and a Winota. Because it lets you cast Winota on 3 and trigger her 3 times. And even though that might not be enough to close out the game on the spot, if you get at least 1 Huntmaster, definitely if you get 2 Huntmasters, and assuming Winota doesn't die on the spot, basically nothing can beat that unless it's just like another combo deck that goes over the top or a control deck that has a sweeper ready.
Yeah, like even like the turn 1 elf that you're like, well, that's a must kill. I'm going to fatal push that. And then they turn 2 innkeeper and you're like, well, I really wish I had another piece of removal, but maybe have to hold this up or something, or maybe like I hope I draw into it. And then there's like turn 3 Winota and trigger. And just because digging 10% through your deck and more at that point, you have a good chance of getting a decent hit there. And that's honestly can be enough just to take over the game. If they make something that removes one of your creatures, like with Brutal Cathar, or just leaves like a lot of power on the battlefield, even if you remove that Winota for the next turn, then it's like, well, how are you going to deal with this Huntmaster and its 2 tokens?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I will say, like, if they're removing everything you're putting down, but you land a Winota and like you just have the Innkeeper, that still feels bad. One Winota trigger is not as strong as multiple Winota triggers, because the way the deck is built now, you do whiff sometimes. And one of the reasons why I liked having at least 3 triggers is because like sometimes you look at 6 that's like elves and lands and fables, and it's like I can't do anything with this. You look at hands with Esika's Chariot and you're just like, I wish this was in my hand or on the board already. I can't put anything I can't cheat anything into play. So in a weird way, maybe even like the old versions of the deck before Chariot that was just like goblin tokens, it was one of the reasons why we were like having those explosive turns where you're dealing 100 damage is because you had so many more tokens and 1-drops to create Winota triggers. Whereas now it's like you have fewer triggers, but your hits are that much stronger because you have like the Huntmasters and the Brutal Cathars. But in any case, try to get yourself in a position where if you're going to go for your Winota turn, you're going as big as possible, because just doing it once, like, that's not as decisive as a win con as you might hope it would be.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
All right, here's my last discussion topic / hot take. And I'm going to quote someone, and I will attribute this quote, but I feel like this is a really good example of a deck that's doing stuff, but isn't necessarily playing games. And I really frequently felt like my decisions did not matter after I mulliganed. And I don't know if you guys heard this, but Ari Lax basically said something to that effect about Pioneer at large on a recent episode of Dominaria's Judgment, where it's just like, you're performing a lot of game actions, but it doesn't really feel like you're playing games. In this case, he was speaking pretty specifically toward the class of interaction that we have in the format.
I don't know if I agree with Ari's take there. I listened to the same episode and I was like, oh, no, Ari. But I see how it applies to this deck in particular.
Here's what I'll say in defense of Ari, who, I never want to defend because he's smarter than I am, and I'm supremely jealous of his success as a Magic player. We're like spoiled as modern players. If you think about like the cards we have access to, going from like Fury to Brutal Cathar, just it doesn't hit the same, And I think there's something to be said about like going from Modern to Pioneer for me, and I suspect a lot of other players, like doesn't feel as satisfying or as fun as maybe going from Pioneer or from Standard to Pioneer, where it kind of does like feel like a power upgrade, and maybe you can like have a deck that's operating on a stronger level that's also a little bit, more resilient to format churn. With Modern, at least, like your removal is so efficient, but also some of your best removal spells come from these supplementary sets. And I think that's also kind of indicative of like how Magic and Standard sets have been curated by Wizards, where your best removal spells are super conditional. And the decisions you have to make is like, what can I put in a deck full of Reckless Rages so that I'm not 2-for-1ing myself? As opposed to, what am I pitching to Fury because I have to 2-for-1 myself? And how do I mitigate that loss?
Mm-hmm.
And this is super subjective, but I just find that like the removal suite that we have in Modern, even if it's like not 2-for-1 spells, like even if we're talking about Lightning Bolt and Unholy Heat and Prismatic Ending, I find that they just kind of generate decisions that, because they're stronger interaction spells, they lead to more interesting points of interaction and sequencing than just like, I'm always going to play my Brutal Cathar and I just have to make sure I'm tagging the card that is going to like kill someone on blocks or just get in the way of lethal damage.
That's a can of worms. Dave.
We have 40 minutes to discuss it, though.
Oh, man, thank goodness. I mean, I hear this argument and discussion a lot about like why is Modern fun? Why do some people consider Modern the best format? And then you hear it a lot, especially in comparison to Pioneer, where it's like, I think I don't know if it's like a power level appetite or if it's like an ability to handle anything that gets thrown at you with something like a march or something like a prismatic ending, or just the back and forth of like haymakers in Modern. So it's like, I don't know. What do you feel about that, Dave?
They're just almost different games. They're different almost the same way that, yeah, I think it's about power level and efficiency of cards, which leads to it being a different style of gameplay, and different decks are good in the format ultimately, and so I think I don't know, I haven't played enough Pioneer to be able to really say. I've played more Explorer lately just because of like availability and of time and things like that, but I think it's nice to be able to switch between the two of them. I don't know if I would objectively try to say one is better than the other.
Yeah.
Like I think that Pioneer, when I've played a bunch of Modern, I definitely don't think I have to think as hard at Pioneer as I do at Modern, even though sometimes you can feel totally powerless playing Modern. A lot of times it's that whole, I think we've talked about this a few times too, like, Modern is a lot about implicit information, and Pioneer, I think, is a lot about explicit information. And so in Modern, you really have to sit there and go like, okay, I only have like 3 game actions in this game, or maybe, it's a limited number of things, and I need to plan it out so that I don't die to Living End, or so I don't die to Yawgmoth or whatever, while trying to make progress on my own plan. In Pioneer, I think it's a little different, although Winota does put a similar pressure on you where you have to like leave up must kill stuff. And so that's why I feel like Winota is kind of annoying to play against anyway. But for the most part, when I'm playing Pioneer, I'm like, okay, I get to try to do my plan. I have a little bit of disruption. They're not going to mess it up too much, and then kind of go from there. And it's about what happens in the game, where Modern's about what happens outside of the game, kind of, or, all of the things that could happen a little bit.
Yeah, I that's why I agree with you there, and I think that's where I don't get the take where it's like you're not really playing games, and I know that's not what you said, Stan. It's just a take where it's like, well, the games of Modern are like more like games of Magic, and I think it's primarily because of the interactive options are a little bit better. And in playing Pioneer, I feel like my games go longer. There are fewer like auto losses. There's not many, besides something like Winota or potentially Greasefang or like Lotus Field, which is definitely on a downswing lately. It's like you're not losing to combo decks or creature combo decks that frequently. And so it's like, I think you just have more time to make more decisions and to develop a game plan. And I think when cards are slightly lower powered, then they bounce off each other in different ways. Whereas like the super strong strategies of Modern, I think, can lead to fewer actual games. But I mean, the interactivity of Modern Horizons 2, I think, definitely has been a big improvement, even if you don't like the free spells and elementals and things like that.
Again, I don't think one is better than the other personally.
Yes.
As long as we don't have like the gross combo meta that Pioneer had for a while and that kind of thing, I think we're good.
Exactly.
Yeah, all I'll say just to close this point that I started up is like, although I don't want to use Winota as a litmus test for the entire format, or I don't want to judge the entire format by this one deck, is what I really want to say. It did feel as though the margins were not thin. And maybe that's a Winota thing, right? Maybe that's like the appeal of this deck, or the problem with this deck is like either you're running away with the games, or someone has like a pile of removal spells that just can answer everything you do.
Right.
But I think that's kind of the key differences I experience in a general or an average Modern game versus like what I see more often than not with the Pioneer metagame is just like in Modern, like sometimes like one crazy top deck or one expressive iteration just like changes the entire texture of a game. And in Pioneer, it's kind of like who gets there faster, just because you have less tools to interact with that aren't conditional, at least.
Sure.
I mean, I think that's fair, really, when it comes down to it. But
yeah, Winota, it's a sleeve.
Weird.
FYI, everybody.
The best deck in the format, it's a sleeve.
I do think like if it gets banned, I don't think it's going to necessarily make the format less linear, to be honest. Like Lotus Field is still kind of doing the same thing. Like Mono Green Devotion, I think, and even like Boros Aggro and Prowess, like I think they do similar things where it's just like super hyperlinear aggressive strategies that are just sort of going to win on the spot unless you happen to have a mid-range or control deck that is catered to what you are up to that can disrupt you along the way. But time will tell. Maybe new sets will improve that.
So y'all, I have a surprise for you.
Well, since it was in the intro, I don't think it's a surprise, but what is it?
Dave, I have a surprise. I have a surprising topic to talk about with you this week, okay?
Have you continued your conversion into being a blue Magic player?
I mean, maybe certain kind of blue spells, like cantrips and counter magic and flying birds.
Those are all the good blue spells. I don't know what else you're looking for.
Not the bounce. What about the bounce spells?
Oh, you like those two if you like those other three.
What about enchantment-based removal?
Ooh, you like that too, probably.
Anyway,
given what's going on right now. I mean, the only thing that you're leaving off that list is like show and tell or omniscience or whatever, like, the big weird blue cards.
I like the Jins as well. So I, this week, decided to continue my exploration of Izzet decks in Explorer featuring Ledger Shredder. Ledger Shredder. Let's say it. I can say it right. I promise you. So everyone knows about Izzet Phoenix. It's been something that we've talked about since episode 1 and probably 2 and probably 3. And I've
In fact, I think we should commit right now. Phoenix will be the topic we talk about on the last episode of the Dive Down whenever that day comes.
Sure. Yeah, why not?
Love
I'll
it.
promise that now. So this episode, I've never really been an adopter of these decks. It's not my style. It's like a little too slow. It's a little too spinning of your wheels. But for science, I was testing this latest iteration of the deck in Explorer, and I will admit that I liked it mostly. And so you're asking, Shane, why
Strong statement.
Yeah, why are you talking about Izzet Phoenix and Explorer, Shane, if this is a deck that we know about and we've seen in Pioneer and things like that? I've seen on Arena a bunch of times. Well, I don't think this newest variation is like drastically different than what you're used to seeing out there, but with incorporating Ledger Shredder as this additional threat, and I think adding Strangle to the deck as cheap, effective removal against creatures and planeswalkers, that does change the way this deck plays out and the power level of this deck and the different ways you have to manipulate your graveyard, manipulate your hand, and be successful with it. And the real question, I think, is does that make a big difference in the way that it performs? And I think that the answer for me is yes, certainly. And the origin of the deck that I played is from an MTG Arena Zone article by Darth Jason, which went into really good detail on the deck. It has sideboard plans, detail on strategies, things like that. So check that link out in the show notes. And so the suite of threats that this deck runs is clean, which is just for Phoenix, for Shredder, and importantly, I'll get into that later, for Crackling Drake. And what each of these threats is doing is something really important, which is, of course, Phoenix is the namesake of the deck. You get the 3/2 flyer out of the graveyard at the cost of doing what your deck wants to do, which is just cast spells from hand. And then even backup, just being a 3/2 hasty flyer is often fine, if not good. And Ledger Shredder, of course, is the card that is sweeping Magic formats of all kinds. The efficiency of the spells in this deck just make it so easy to double, triple spell. And Shredder is helping with that card selection, which a deck like this desperately needs because you have a lot of air. And so getting to needed threats, getting to needed removal, all that kind of stuff is super important. It can also discard your Phoenix, which is really key. Another way to get Phoenix in the yard. And it grows by itself. All the things that we talked about last week in the Shredder deep dive. And I think in Explorer, the main weakness is that it eats Fatal Pushes, but it's the only thing in your deck that eats Fatal Pushes. And I think most of the time you want to play this on turn 3, unless you think that you're going to need like as fast a clock as possible, and every counter on Shredder is going to matter. But, you can cast a Shredder, you can cast a single opt or, consider, and then you get the connive trigger, and that's value right there, even if it eats a Fatal Push. And then I think Crackling Drake is probably my favorite threat in the deck, to be honest with you, because it's just such a finisher. Like, this deck is slow. Like, this deck is not fast at closing games. Like, you are not turboing out multiple Phoenixies off of like your Faithless Looting like we did 173 episodes ago. You know what I mean? And so Crackling Drake it's this finisher that dodges the unless it's a revolted fatal push, it can't eat that. It frequently requires like multiple red removal spells to get it off the battlefield. It draws a card on ETB, and really importantly, it closes the games quickly. So like by the time you're resolving a Crackling Drake or getting like your second Crackling Drake, it's like a 13-4 and doing work.
I can't believe this. This is really where we've crossed over into Shane is fully converted now, and Stan, we're gonna have to find a different set of decks to play because now Shane likes to play these too, and so now we need to find our own thing again. But like Crackling Drake is the final key of cards I know Shane said were terrible like 2 years ago, and now things are good.
It's good in this deck. It's all about context, right? It's all about context.
Look, Crackling Drake, like you said, is a good card because it draws a card when it comes into play,
yes,
and it helps you be resilient to graveyard hate, and that's great. That's always been a good thing about it for sure. And so I'd love to see you seeing the light.
Yeah, it's really funny. Speaking of the graveyard hate, is like I had multiple opponents bring in turn 2 Rest in Peace against me, or like they drop a turn 2 Rest in Peace, and I am literally like, I do not care.
Especially because you sideboarded your Phoenixes out.
Sometimes I think
that's
you could
the
do
real
that.
play.
I think if you see it, like I'm not going to do that game 2 unless like it's clearly going to do some kind of Rest in Peace shenanigans. But like if I see it game 2 and I don't win, for some crazy reason I don't win that game 2, then sure, then you can like kind of get the Phoenix keys out. I think, but like hard casting a Phoenix is just fine, just as like an additional threat. Like it's not like great, but like I've finished many games with just like, oh well, there's my 3/2 haster in the air and just close the game out.
I'm dying right now.
I love this. This is honestly why I talked about this deck, is just to basically get your guys' takes on my take. So,
but this is exactly things that we said 2 years ago, and you
never
were like, "It's terrible."
No, it's not great. This is Explorer, okay?
Yeah. Fine.
Shane is a lifelong learner. We all have growing and learning to do. Shane more than anyone. I am curious though. Did you ever miss Thing in the Ice?
I barely remember playing Thing in the Ice. I'm sure I did. But
the effect, like
the upheaval.
Like having a 2-drop that doesn't necessarily die to red removal that easily, that also can just like reset the board.
I think here's the thing. I never really felt like opposing creature decks were dramatic threats to me, unless they were like a really like hyper aggressive deck that was going really wide or something like that, and they just got the board full of creatures faster than I could take care of them, or faster than I can like present blockers that matter, like a Crackling Drake or something like that. Then yeah, I think like that would be a case where I'd be like, yeah, I wish I had even the option for Thing in the Ice. Like I would love like Thing as like a sideboard option perhaps, right? Where it's like, if I'm going up against like humans or some kind of just like elves for some reason or something like that, then yeah, having the ability to do an upheaval would be pretty cool. But I think you can get sweeper effects in the sideboard in red. You don't necessarily need the upheaval effect. You can just sweep things out of there. You have enough removal to take care of meaningful threats, I think. But yeah, I think that we talked about this kind of last week, which is just like people are using Ledger Shredder instead of Thing in the Ice now, right? Even though it's a drastically different piece of cardboard on the battlefield.
Yeah, and I think it's opening the door a little bit, because if I remember right, many of the Phoenix decks before Ledger Shredder came out also were not running Drake anymore. And so they're mostly just Phoenix and Thing in the Ice. And so to go to a slightly more threat dense deck, right, that helps you kind of build this all flyers, some resilient to graveyard, some exploiting the graveyard, some helping you cycle through your deck, I think it's an interesting kind of triumvirate to go with, especially if there isn't some reason to really want Thing in the Ice, which apparently might be where we are at the moment.
Yeah. I can even see a world where it's like you do run some Sprite Dragons just for additional threats, like additional targets for fatal pushes, and if they don't deal with them, then it can kind of run away with the game. That would involve finding room for those. So it's just kind of, what cantrips do you shave? What kind of, do you shave a land here or there? Like, I don't know. That's the kind of risks that I'm not willing to take with this kind of deck yet. But, that's kind of belies the point of the deck, I think, in a lot of ways, which is like, this is not aggressive, right? And I think I want to get into a little bit more of that and kind of like how I actually found myself playing this deck and whether or not that made me actually like it or not. But what I think is the first thing I want to talk about is Strangle in this deck, right? And I think that Strangle is a big deal in Explorer and probably Pioneer because it expands your removal suite not only into 3 damage removal, but also into Planeswalker targeting and Planeswalker damage for 1 mana. It's also a sorcery speed spell. Okay? And so 3 damage for 1 is really good, particularly for this deck because it gets rid of problematic threats like Graveyard Trespasser, which can start eating your graveyard, or Bonecrusher Giant, which can just put a clock on you and can also trade with if you're forced to block, can trade with like your late game Crackling Drake when you really want to be attacking with that card. And so taking care of it, even if it deals you 2 damage, you're fine with that because it's stopping repeated 4 damage against you. And what's also important, I think, too, is that if you're playing against a creature light deck, game 1, when you might shave them game 2, is like if you want to recur a Phoenix and you have creature-based removal only, then you're kind of stuck. You're right. Well, I'm going to target my own thing. But if you're playing against like a Planeswalker deck, like a control deck that sticks something, then you can target your opponent's Planeswalkers with this, and it gives you a spell trigger to start counting towards your 3 storm count to get your Phoenixies back, which is really advantageous as well. And then, because it's a sorcery, it's a really good card to have available with your 2 of Finale of Promise in this deck, because that casts 1 instant and 1 sorcery from your graveyard, and Strangle sorcery speed. So you cast your Finale for 3. That's going to get you like a removal spell and like a deck filtering card of your choice for cheap, recurs or Phoenixies all by its lonesome, as it's always done. But I think having the ability to get that sorcery speed, damage-based removal, or Planeswalker interaction is really strong. The sideboard I think what's interesting about the sideboard options in Izzet is, one, I think the selection of blue counter magic is pretty strong in Explorer/Pioneer because, you get things like, the Disdainful Stroke has been a house for me in the dozens of matches I've played with this deck. I think it takes care of a lot of the high mana value cards that people are trying to do to go over the top or to reclaim the board. And because there's no Supreme Verdict, you can take care of any kind of sweeper that an opponent's saving to try to clear out a couple Crackling Drakes or 3 creatures you have on your side or something like that. It takes care of all sorts of high-powered Planeswalkers.
Yeah. One thing I just want to know really quick while we're talking about sideboard is we talked a little bit about Thing in the Ice just now and about maybe having that in your sideboard. That's not available in Explorer.
No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, like you can't even play it.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah.
I'm saying, like it could, like once it's printed into the format, then that could be consideration for sure. And, of course, you can do your Spell Piercers, you can do your Mystical Disputes, you can do your Braids, which can handle like Greasefang or Mayhem Devil or annoying artifacts that get to the board. You can grind harder with like Ox of Agonis, whatever you think fits the meta, or many things you think fit the meta. You're going to have some kind of option to them, even in just Izzet colors, that I think have there's a lot of value there in this deck. And so all of that sort of comes together to be a deck that everyone knows about, right? But I think the reason I'm actually talking about this is I think like playing Phoenix kind of for the first time, actually sticking with it and being like, in this powered format, what does playing this deck actually feel like for someone who does not gravitate towards decks like these? And I think what playing this deck felt like was pretty good because I like evasion. I like the value that the threats bring to the table. I like the way to dig through my deck for hate cards and removal and things like that. And then you get to feel smart when you counter someone's spell, if it's like the most obvious thing in the world. It's not like it's just like playing a threat 1 turn later just because you're like, I need to keep up this counter spell. Yeah, this is obvious stuff. This is obvious counter magic and fairly obvious gameplay sequencing. But then when it actually works, you feel like, oh, that worked exactly like I planned. And that feels pretty cool.
Yeah, Shane, it does feel pretty cool.
Feels pretty cool.
I love this. That's the best part to me, though, is him saying, now I know how to counterspell.
Do I?
That's
though?
great.
Do I?
I am curious. You said that the deck felt good. Can I just get like a quick snapshot of like what were the matchups that you felt you were doing best in versus worst in, maybe?
Best in, I would say, like, I don't know how Rakdos Sack can beat this deck. Like, I just don't know. Like, unless it draws like all the fatal pushes exactly when it needs it, and then has you can turn on Revolt really easily in the Sack decks, and then you just get enough threats down. You stick and I don't remove like your Mayhem Devil, and then you kind of are able to do enough. But like if you're trying to mope around with like a bunch of 1/1 constructs or whatever, and like trying to just like drain gain super slowly with like the Anvil plan, it's just not going to work. Like because I'm attacking the air. And I that was like one of the most lopsided matchups I've had in a super long time, was like where my Rakdos Sacrifice decks. I think one of the ones that was really annoying was Greasefang, because you don't have a huge suite of instant speed removal or creature-based counterspells, and so you don't have a great way to get rid of that namesake creature of the deck. And then they have so many ways of like recurring it that stresses that removal again, in the same way that you're stressing other decks and their removal with your Arclight Phoenixes and things like that. But having an Arclight Phoenix come back from the graveyard is a lot less powerful than like a Parhelion 2 coming back out of the graveyard from Greasefang or something like that. So, I don't know, like Azorius Control and other decks that kind of want to go big late game, like Fires of Invention, those have felt fine, because like I was getting at earlier, is I think you can interact with their big spells with your counter magic, and you can kind of try to predict what they're going for and just play slowly enough and be patient. And that's something that I learned a lot with this deck, is just like, look, you're not going to have fast matches. And that's kind of an actual weakness for me of the deck, is like, you just want to if you want to just play some magic and just have like a match or two in like 45 minutes of gameplay, then this is a good deck. I think it's very strong. I think it has good matchups against the field right now, and I think it's good, but you don't get to play a lot of games. So you have to really like going to like turn 9, turn 10, turn 11 in all of your games, and across, usually two or three games in your matches. And in fact, in all of them, they're either 2 or 3. So then you have to enjoy that, and you have to want to play slow, thoughtful, methodical, take over the end game, inevitability style decks. And that's not typically my go-to. Like, I prefer more proactive. I prefer to ask more direct questions. I prefer to have creatures that are doing something perhaps a bit more interesting than just sort of cycling through my deck or just being really big, like a Crackling Drake. But winning's also fun.
It's interesting. It's a different take, because, in the formats where you have access to Faithless Looting, like Historic, you can get kind of aggro with this.
Exactly. You just can't do it. You're not putting like 2 Phoenixes down on turn 4 or anything like that.
And even in Pioneer, where you have access to Temporal Trespass with Galvanic Iteration to be able to do like some really wild, like, hey, I'm going to bring my Phoenixes back and then I'm going to have 3 turns in a row, it still can feel kind of aggro combo-y, like spell space combo there. So it's interesting to hear that Explorer is pretty good. It's pretty good in Explorer still, even without all the tools that it has access to, because it's still a strong card, a strong payoff. It's got good supporting cast, and so I don't always feel like Phoenix is like a grindy deck, you know what I mean? But it definitely can be that, and so it's interesting to see it be that in this format right now at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I really feel like almost all my matches felt like grind fests, just like a lot of I'm going to stick a Crackling Drake and kill you because we petered out to that point, and then I held up some counter magic in case you tried to remove it or cast something huge or anything like that. So yeah, I think long story short, I'm gonna keep playing this, but it's almost like I want to find something that's a little bit faster. just to get a few more matches in, like to feel like I'm accomplishing something. Like it's hard to like, jump on the phone in bed before going to sleep and being like, I'm going to start one game, and it's like 10:45 or something like that, and like I'm still finishing up game 3 of my match, and it's like, oh god, I wish this just ended. But
right, 11:30, you're like, I'm finishing this match. Okay,
sorry, wife, I don't know why I started this before dinner. So just concede. It's fine. It's just a ladder. So I mean, this is definitely something I think I'd probably rather play a league with. Like if I was just like I'm going to do like a high value experience and maybe just find something that's like slightly more aggressive if I really do feel like laddering up to diamond for some reason or something like that. But yeah, it's a cool deck. If you have not played a Phoenix deck before, I think this is a cool and fun version of it. I would recommend it for any player, especially one who likes being able to filter through things and find answers and be able to counter a spell now and then. But if not, that's cool. It's not necessarily what I thought I would like, but it's definitely it's been nice to have a little bit of a breakthrough with Izzet Phoenix and Ledger Shredder and things like that. So,
and now you finally like all 5 colors of Magic. I would love to hear you say, Shane, or perhaps
say you like it, Shane. Say you like all 5 colors.
Tell us you like it.
I would love to hear you maybe try like the Pioneer Prowess deck from the Sunday Pio Challenge and kind of compare and contrast the two.
He played that
I played it last week,
right?
Yeah, I was playing that. It's a great deck. The Prowess deck is way cooler. It's way more aggressive. It's way more misstyle. I have not played any of the Pioneer Phoenix decks. So I think it's a drastically different feeling deck in terms of pace and spell type and the way that it plays. So, but yeah, I'm gonna play it again. Don't worry, Stan. I'm playing that Izzet Prowess deck. I almost have it's almost all built. My full art pathways came today.
Our master plan of finally being a show that's only about Izzet decks or Izzet adjacent decks is one step closer.
Time to rename the pod.
The Izzet adjacency. Is it good? Is it terrible?
Well, fun. Dave, do you have a deck to talk about?
A deck of cards playing with my kids at the picnic table at the campground.
Played a lot of Sushi Go this weekend at the campground. Yeah.
Are your kids good at that?
No, they can't draft at all. They're terrible at
it. They probably love yelling Sushi Go. Isn't that one of the rules of the game? Like you actually have to yell it.
I think
it's not like Uno.
When you have the chopsticks, it says you're supposed to yell it. Yes. I haven't had a chance to play any Magic this week.
All right, before we go, guys, can I just crack this pack on Mike? I've been holding it for like 6 hours.
Is that a collector's pack?
It's a set.
Boring.
I just don't. I can't not buy booster packs. It's my greatest weakness. I hate buying draft boosters.
Where are you finding them anymore? Like, where do you go that has boosters? Do you shop at Target?
In this case, I went to that new LGS that I was talking about.
Oh yeah, I wish I had one of those around the corner
with the $20 Pioneer decks. When I took my little afternoon skate in the sun.
David, my Target does not have like any card game products anymore.
Oh wow,
it's really annoying.
So we got a Gold Hound. We got that next card is.
So we got Gold Hound. We got Chrome Cat, a cat and a dog.
Cool.
Exhibition Magician. Light 'em up. That card did not turn into anything. Freelance Muscle, Rhino Warrior. Okay.
Dave's nickname.
Cleanup Crew. This could be a good hit for Winota. 6/6 Human Citizen.
I've done so.
Destroy Artifact Enchantment. Blah blah blah. Stimulus Package. Love those, but not in Magic, just in real life. My art card is Rakish Revelers.
Ooh, rakish.
Yeah, rakish is the word. Yeah,
whatever.
That's
my
that
other
mana
art
fixing
card
one.
is Corpse Appraiser.
Good corpse.
I think my first
3 out of 5
rare,
stars.
You can slap 4 or 5 other bodies in this corpse. All right, my first rare, assuming I have more, Black Market Tycoon. Whiff.
It's Ginger Brute. Weird.
Hey, I got a list card. Exquisite Blood.
Oh, isn't that worth a lot? That's worth a crap ton of money.
That is one of the biggest ones on the list. I think it's like a $25 card.
Of course, Stan got that. Exquisite Blood.
Of course I did. I mean, I had to get through a foil broker's initiate to get to it.
Yeah, the Avacyn Restored version is like $30 ish. It's a big EDH card.
Yeah, there you go. You made your pack worth it.
Heck yeah. This is why I tell the listeners, always buy packs. Well, that wraps up this week's show. If you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to our podcast so you get the latest episodes as soon as they come out. And if you use Apple Podcasts, please leave us a rating and review. You can also leave ratings on Spotify. If you'd like to submit a question or just reach out to us in general, you can tweet us at The Dive Down, all one word. You can also email thedivedown@gmail.com. You can also support the show over at our Patreon, patreon.com/thedivedown. Get in there. Shout out to Mana Traders for sponsoring The Dive Down. You sign up for Mana Traders using promo code TheDiveDown15, all one word. You'll get 15% off your first 2 months of renting Magic Online cards. You heard that right. We have a new promo code. It's TheDiveDown15. Unfortunately, that means we no longer have the same code between Mana Traders and Barrister and Man. The code at Barrister and Man is still TheDiveDown2022. Use that to get 15% off your first order of your shaving, grooming, and fragrance products over at Barrister and Man. As always, special thanks to the bands Nowhere and Spaceblood for letting us use their music. And until next week, get out there and buy more booster packs.